Cubism. I don't know how helpful this is, but it's quite interesting. This is a work by Georges Braque, the sort of the Cubist painter. I don't know, around 1910 or so, and it certainly had an influence on McLuhan. I think I don't even know what the name of this painting is. It's a picture. It's a painting of a violin, Cubist painting of a violin. And if you start thinking violin, you start to see things in there. You see I think they're called the F holes in the strings and the posts, and you seem to see different violins and different parts of violins from different angles, perspectives. Well, the great interests of Cubism, aside from just whatever beauty you find painting, of course, is this sense of insisting on looking at an object or portraying an object from multiple points of view at once. What we see is that we're seeing a violin, but we're seeing it from all different sorts of angles. Of course, couldn't see it from every angle because there are an infinite number of angles through which you can view an object. But we see the front, we see the back, and it all seems to be sort of exploded and quite interesting. And yeah, beautiful painting. Braque was a great painter, I think. Why would McLuhan be interested in this? Well, I think for different reasons. Like one of the expressions that he coins in the medium is the massage. The book we'll be looking at next week is this notion of all at onceness. All at onceness, which of course can't really be a word, but is an interesting play on a word. All at onceness. That's what electric media do. They present things to us all at once in a sort of a complete package, rather than in this sort of linear way, where we get this sort of step by step presentation of a theme, a thing. I mean, a violin, if you're going to paint a picture of a violin, you should choose a perspective and apply the rules of perspective and present it from one point of view. But the Cubists didn't. They presented it from multiple point of views, not from all, again, impossible. But so what does it mean to look at a violin? Well, I mean, it means to look at it from different perspectives. This is maybe an attempt to capture that. I don't know anything about painting. I'm kind of out of my depth here. I hope I don't make too much of a fool of myself, but I think it's something of what's going on. So I think that McLuhan thought of the all at onceness, say, of television, where we're sort of presented, say, with a news piece where we're just sort of in Vietnam or in Iraq or at the North Pole, and things sort of obliteration of space, and, presented with a sort of a total package all at once. That it was similar to what was going on in Cubism. Another thing that he says, which is kind of interesting, is that he thought that Cubism, by seizing on instant total awareness, suddenly announced that the medium is the message. And that, again, this sort of instant total awareness of Cubism, he saw as being similar to the instant total awareness of electric media. But also, it announced that the medium is the message, and maybe that's modern art, right? I mean, modern art is a kind of art that calls attention to its own form. I suppose, starting with Impressionism and moving through the 20th century, that modern art is not predominantly naturalistic, where it tries to sort of not draw attention to the fact that it's art, but modern art does draw attention. It's formalist. It wants you to know that it's art. It wants you to know that it is a medium. It's calling attention to itself. I mean, there's no way you can look at this painting and not be reminded that it's a painting. Right? You're not sort of enwrapped in the violin itself. You're enwrapped in the representation of a violin. It's a self-conscious piece of art, and maybe that's, I suppose, an important theme in 20th century art. I mean, as opposed to say a Hollywood movie, a classic Hollywood movie, which critics have said tries to present an experience that masks the fact that it's art. You know, where the form is not is underplayed, so that the story itself seems like just something that's occurring, kind of like real life or something. But Hollywood movies were famous and were praised for not calling attention to the fact that they were art, whereas other forms of film did self-consciously form one. Other themes here, mention of de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville, of course, being most famous for writing a book called Democracy in America, and sort of first European thinker to seriously examine American culture, maybe the first person ever to seriously examine American culture in the early 19th century. Um, but this sort of gets us into some of the themes, some of the effects that specific concrete effects that McLuhan thinks the new technologies are having. De Tocqueville, in earlier work on the French Revolution, had explained how the French Revolution, was the printed word that, achieving cultural saturation in the 18th century, had homogenized the French nation. Frenchmen were the same kind of people from north to south. The typographic principles of uniformity, continuity, and lineality had overlaid the complexities of ancient feudal and oral society. The revolution was carried out by the new literati and lawyers. So this is an interesting thesis that, we think about nations like France as just being French people, right? But they had to be created too. I mean, there's regionalisms in France, which are quite important. And there are different cultures, really, and certainly different languages. French, standard French is a kind of a modern invention, just as standard Italian is, and just as standard English is. And this homogenizing effect, McLuhan claims, was really made possible by type, by the Gutenberg technologies. And it was able to impose a certain standard on everyone. What does it mean to read and speak and write in French? Well, it probably meant many things at one time, but once you are able to publish books that get wide distribution, and newspapers that are, written, books that are written in Paris and read in Provence, whatever, you get this sort of homogeneity. And it's certainly true that homogeneity has not only been a French phenomenon, but a German one, and an Italian one, an American one, a British one. And that what he's sort of suggesting by pointing this out, that it was, I think what he's suggesting, is pointing this out, is that just as the Gutenberg technology of print was able to have this homogenizing effect on the societies of its time when it was introduced, that the sort of post-Gutenberg world that we live in is probably different insofar as that homogeneity and that went along with print technology in what is essentially a new oral society that we're creating. That we might be heading back to what he would call a tribal situation rather than a centralized culture, a culture that's more broken up. And by tribal, I just mean broken up into smaller pieces, smaller communities that don't identify with the overarching thing like the nation or being a world citizen or something. So, sort of a suggestion there. Again, sort of very large claims, right? That these effects on us are happening at the subconscious level, where they can be most effective because they don't meet any conscious resistance. Obviously, and again, a big claim that maybe we have to think about. And here, maybe this last bit, these are all excerpts from the reading. Maybe a note of warning to what exactly we're getting into when we let electric technologies sort of take over.